Currently there's about 80 billion animals slaughtered for food every year. There's just simply too many animals for the planetary boundaries to hold. The biggest issue harming the environment and the climate that's related to animal welfare is the farming of animals in intensive conditions. So not only do animals suffer greatly in these confined, barren, inside keeping systems, but they also produce a lot of pollution. So that's soil pollution, air pollution, water, and they also create a lot of greenhouse gases, particularly methane, which is actually more potent than carbon dioxide. So you have kind of a trifecta of issues. You have suffering, you have environmental pollution, and then you have the global warming effect. There is a growing demand for animal products. I think in Europe we consume 3 times the recommended allowance of dairy products, especially in Northern Europe. So we keep farming and we keep adding more and more animals, actually even for textiles, so more animals for wool. So in order to meet this demand, we're putting more and more animals in factory farms. So in terms of the land that we use for farming animals, it's not just the site of the farm, it's also the need that we have to produce mass amounts of food, of concentrated feed, to feed these animals. And the reason we need to do that is because they're high yield breeds, so they're built for performance and they expend a lot of energy. So you need to give them more and more calories. But in order to do that, we as Europeans, as wherever there are high producing countries of animals, we have to import because we just don't have the land. Of the agricultural land that's used on the planet, 77% is used for livestock related farming. And this obviously has massive impacts on local communities, on the environment, and it's actually not the best use of arable land. These are crops that could be fed to humans. Cut out the middle cow, because actually animals don't convert energy efficiently. There's an incredible amount of calorie and energy loss when you convert a crop to a meat or milk product. So we really need to reconsider how we use land. We do see that policymakers are really realising that they need to make a change in the way that we farm. So there's more pushing for agroecological practices which support animal welfare. It has a social element and also an environmental element. However, the way the system is set up for farming animals, it is very hard to make changes. So you have reliance on feed, you have reliance on high yield breeds, and you cannot change one without dealing with the other. So we need to address this consumption and having a more sustainable food system, and part of the way that we can do that is by reducing our consumption, making sure our policymakers implement strategies that promote plant-based foods, that remove the barriers to producing these plant-based foods, like giving people more subsidies if they're trying to set up a plant-based food business, and also supporting those farmers that want to move away from factory farming. So the link between higher standards of animal welfare and climate change mitigation and adaptation is quite clear in terms of how we farm more traditionally. So in terms of having cattle or sheep on permanent pasture, we have sort of different co-benefits. So the animals themselves are allowed to express natural behaviours, they can graze, they have more of a herd mentality. So that's why it's good for animal welfare. But also, if you have the correct number of animals on pasture, they actually can play a role in sequestering carbon through their grazing or through the way that they kind of like trample through the fields. So you actually can offset your emissions. And again, if you have the right amount of numbers of animals in a herd, you can also use the manure that they create to fertilize the ground, and it helps you rely not so much on the synthetic fertilizers. So you're kind of creating a closed loop system where everything is benefiting.